Claire Alexander, and I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Manchester, and I'm also the associate director of the Centre on the Dynamics of Ethnicity Code. So the work on the history curriculum builds on a decade of work that I've been doing in partnership with Runnymede on developing a more inclusive history curriculum. And we've been doing some work with teachers and schools to understand what the barriers and challenges are in teaching diverse histories. So obviously in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, that's become very, very kind of central to people's minds about the kinds of histories that we're teaching in schools. So we're now working in this current research on two things, one of which is with a range of partners who are trying to get curriculum reform in schools, particularly around history. And we're working with a number of kind of professional organisations, the History Association, the Royal Historical Society, exam boards, schools, some of the campaigning groups, like the Black Curriculum, for example, in pressuring government to try and affect curriculum reform and what that would look like. And the second strand in that is to look at the barriers to teacher training. So one of the things that we found is that history teaching is very white as a profession. So what can be done to support more Black and minority ethnic people into teaching, into history teaching specifically, but also how can we help white teachers feel comfortable teaching Black histories in all their kind of diversity. So we're working, that's the project that we're working on. We're working on a work package on ethnic entrepreneurship, which builds on some research that we were doing funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, which was looking at the Indian restaurant trade in Brick Lane. And that work finished, the first round of fieldwork finished just before the lockdown. And we were there mapping the way in which Brick Lane as a street had changed, new kinds of businesses were coming in, and the kind of pressures that was putting on the Indian restaurants there, but also the significance of those restaurants to the history of the area in the East End, but also the Bangladeshi community. So what we're doing now is picking up on that work and work that was being done by my colleague, Suzanne Hall at the LSE, who has been doing a project for a number of years called Ordinary Streets. And she visually maps high streets, which are very kind of ethnically diverse. And so you just get a sense of, where the businesses are, who owns those businesses, who works in those businesses, what kinds of resources, cultural, social resources those businesses have. It's fascinating work. So what we're hoping to do with this project is build on those two projects, the Brick Lane one and Susie's Ordinary Streets project, to see how the pandemic has affected those businesses in those high streets. So again, we have a kind of before and after picture of the pandemic. So hoping to kind of trace those changes. One of the reasons that I think this work is important for the history curriculum, I mean, there have been pressures to change the history curriculum for over 50 years, and there have been lots of community-based activities around making sure that diverse histories get taught, usually not in schools. But I think what's interesting about the current moment is, particularly after Black Lives Matter, that there's a real kind of goodwill and pressure from a whole range of different organizations, mainstream organizations, community organizations, to affect real change in schools. So I think that understanding how that can work, bringing people together to do that in a kind of constructive, dialogic way, carrying people with them is really important. So I think that work that we're doing and understanding how that then can take shape in classrooms with teachers is very important. So I think there's a chance for, I'm hopeful there's a chance for real change, which there hasn't been prior to now. I think we'll have to see how that pans out. And for the High Street one, we don't know very much about ethnic entrepreneurship in some ways. So, and particularly the way in which high streets work and have changed, particularly through, I mean, high streets in cities are often a very good way of showing how migration is changing, because the first thing that will appear will be kind of restaurants which reflect the kind of cuisine of the new groups. So that can often be quite kind of fast changing. So I think this work is important partly because it will show very clearly the impact of the pandemic on those quite precarious forms of businesses. It will also show, I think, in the next phase of work that we're going to do, which is on employment more broadly, is what happens to people if they're no longer working in those shops and restaurants. You know, where will they go? How will they work? What will happen to them? But it also, I think, shows the importance of those high streets to the history of the UK. So the restaurant trade in Brick Lane is an absolutely central part of thinking about how we think about Britishness and what those communities, migrant, immigrant, minority communities, bring to the UK and its understanding of itself. So I think understanding the threat that those communities are under, what support can be given to them to recognise that history and that importance, symbolic, economic, social, cultural, is really crucial at this time when they're under threat.